wanted to highlight the importance of this moment of bringing together all of our organizations that are working to address long and impactful environmental injustices that have occurred across the Bronx for decades. Uh, one of the most memorable is probably Robert Moses, the Cross Bronx Expressway, the Harlem River Drive for Manhattanites in the room, and our Deegan Expressway that truly cut off communities from the waterfront. Um, we are looking to address this as an environmental justice project with all groups in Northern Manhattan and in the Bronx coming together here in this coalition to really try to address our concerns and to speak to our congressional representatives about these concerns and hopefully be able to correct some of these injustices that have been here with our communities and our families for decades. If just folks want to take a look before we turn the page here, these are organizations that are in the room here today. And we have a few organizations that are in the room that have not yet signed on as partners of the Bronx and Northern Manhattan, Equity Partnership. But we welcome their participation and we're excited to look at building a cleaner, greener, more equitable Bronx and Upper Manhattan. We also want to recognize that we're here with part of the New York City Greenway Coalition, which is a citywide group that's working to address greenway inequities across the city. I just love for us to turn the page one, Daniel. Okay, so as I was mentioning, we're here today to address the needs of our communities. The Bronx, Upper Manhattan are some of the more isolated communities, separated from one another by the Cross Bronx, by bridges, by highways, and there is not an accessible east-west connection between the Bronx. We don't have any cross borough trains from the Bronx to Manhattan. Not sure why, probably equity issues. We're also trying to address, therefore, alternative transportation, greenways, safe bike paths, so that community members can commute and get around without putting their lives in danger, and ideally so that we can connect to our waterfront that we've been often so separated from. We're also trying to address water quality. Our water quality in the Bronx, the Harlem River has the most CSOs of any river in the entirety of New York City. The Bronx River has tremendous pollution coming into it, as does the Hutch from Westchester. We need to address those issues of environmental justice. We also need mitigation for all these highway, railways, and bridges that have taken our waterfront and our communities away from us. So we'd love to welcome and just hear from our congressional representatives to know who is in the room. I didn't get everyone who signed in at this point from our congressional staff, and I know a few folks are going to be coming in, but before we transition to the next section, I just would love to have our staffers or representatives just say hello and introduce themselves. Destiny, you have your hand raised.
Hi, folks. This is Destiny Cruz. I'm a constituent liaison and field representative from the office of Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. Always an honor to be with my fellow Bronxites, to just really see what we can do to make a change, and especially through the lens of environmental justice. So thank you all so much. And I'm happy to just be here and learn from you all.
Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
And this is Todd with Congressman Adriano Espaillat.
Wonderful. Thank you, Todd, for being with us.
Hi everyone, Victor Martinez from the Office of Congressmember Richie Torres in the Bronx. I'm the Deputy District Director here. It's good to be here. I have been to a few meetings that Chauncey coordinates, and I have met with a couple of you already in some way, talking about different projects. So I'm looking forward to the conversation and to see in what way we can provide any assistance.
Wonderful. We appreciate you being here today, Victor.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Nareda Gomez with Councilmember Vanessa Gibson's office.
Thank you, Nareda. Cecile? Cecil?
Hey, happy National Empanada Day. This is Cecil Brooks here. I'm following Victor's footsteps here from Congressman Richie Torres's office, also wearing a few hats, Bronx Committee Chair at Transportation Alternatives. So wonderful to see a lot of familiar faces here.
Excellent. Do we have any other representatives in the room? I know we are going to have a representative from Congressman Bowman's office. They might be running a few minutes late. And then we are also expecting representatives from Senator Schumer and Senator Gillibrand's offices. Yet, not yet. So we will send them a reminder as we do not want to put this on hold for us. So we are actually moving ahead of schedule here for everyone, and that is a rarity.
Yep.
But that is a wonderful thing. So I am going to actually turn it over to one of our neighborhood historians and Greenway advocates for decades on, Dart Westfall.
Chauncey, you always make me feel so old. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for doing all this. My name is Dart Westfall, and I am here as a board member and past president of the Bronx Council for Environmental Quality. But I started out working for the South Bronx Open Space Task Force in 1979. I'm a founding board member and past president of the Bronx River Alliance, and I have been involved with a host of other environmental organizations, many of whom are on this call today. Clearly, it is time for me to step back and allow other voices to be heard on these topics. I've spent the last 10 years working to train the next generation of nonprofit leaders, mostly by serving as an interim executive director during organizational transitions. We all have great expectations for the new directions being seized in Congress, particularly by our Bronx delegation. It's my job to make sure that the progress we know will come builds on our work done over the past decades, and that we use experiences of the past in a way that can accelerate change. If we can have the next slide. There we go. So one example of this is the Bronx Greenway system. The earliest Bronx Greenway plan was completed in 1993 under Borough President Ferrer. The map on your screen shows that plan, which was expanded and updated in 2007. Many leaders from BCEQ were on that committee and worked diligently with others to bring it close to fruition. The project spawned the Tour de Bronx bike ride, which we hope we get back again, and the Bronx Park Speak Up, which has now been going for 27 years. We know that plans like this are retail operations that happen one capital project at a time, but our concern is that Bronx projects take too long. Greenway segments go unfinished and connections unbuilt, so that cyclists and walkers wind up at dead ends or get lost trying to find the next segment. The Hudson and Harlem River Greenways on the far left of the map on your screen are good examples of unfinished business But Hutchinson River and the Bronx River too have gaps and uncompleted segments long after other greenways elsewhere in the city and the state are being happily used by their citizens. And greenways are not just greenways. Leaving the old infrastructure in place, and if you can look at the wonderful picture that other people will give you details about in a few minutes, you'll see what I'm talking about. This old infrastructure in place hampers other goals for our environment. Developing greenways is compatible with space for alternate transportation, including cycling, walking, and bus rapid transit. And yes, I'm talking to you, Milka, and covering the Cross Bronx Expressway. If developed correctly, greenways can help water quality by filtering stormwater and providing community access to our waterfront, which really doesn't exist west of the Bronx River. You just can't get there. And finally, as you see from this photo, we sorely need greenways to allow us to think differently of how we use our space and mitigate the incredible impact of all the highways, railways, and bridges that use our mainland borough to connect New York to the rest of the world. So that's our agenda. I'm going to step back now.
Wonderful. And as I mentioned, while we are doing an Upper Manhattan and Bronx coalition, there is actually a New York City Greenway coalition that is coalesced over the last several months. And we would like to welcome Terry from the Brooklyn Greenway Coalition to share that vision about a citywide greenway.
Thank you so much, Chauncey, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to present to you all this afternoon. My name is Terry Carta, and I'm Executive Director of Brooklyn Greenway Initiative, but I'm here today in the capacity of the New York City Greenway Coalition, which is about 35 groups from across the city, and you'll see a list of them in just a second. But first, I want to just reiterate what Dart just said about the benefits of greenways. They provide a multitude of benefits to New Yorkers. They provide equitable access to open space and waterfronts, helping New Yorkers reconnect with our history and help shape our future. The greenways help us meet targets for reduced greenhouse gas emissions, capture stormwater, and protect our coastlines. They provide safe and affordable mobility and transportation alternatives. And greenways enable and encourage healthy lifestyles and active recreation. And they increasingly provide access to growing job centers that are outside of the Manhattan core. And greenways not only connect to job centers, but as capital projects, our greenways create 50% more jobs than their comparable distance of highway projects, which is important right now as we come out of a pandemic and severe job loss. Next slide, please. Here in New York City, thank you. Here in New York City, the current Greenway planned network, as you see on the right, is about 400 miles, but only about 300 miles exist today. And the map on the left shows the piecemeal network and how it exists right now. It's a piecemeal mix of segments that don't connect to each other. And as such, because they're not networked, they're not able to deliver all of the benefits that they're capable of. The map also shows that some of the biggest gaps in the network are in low income and or communities of color, including Upper Manhattan and the Bronx, and where the gaps are probably greatest in the city. Next slide. Again, the map on the right is in stark contrast. There we go. Again, the map on the right is in stark contrast to the anticipated network on the left, which shows the piecemeal network in various states of repair. One of the major challenges in our Greenway network citywide is that they fall under multiple agency jurisdictions, including City Department of Transportation, New York City Parks and Recreation Department, and New York City Economic Development Corporation, among others, including some segments of our citywide network that fall under state or federal jurisdiction. And it's this coordination across agencies and particularly across boroughs and other political districts that make their implementation and ongoing maintenance challenging at best. However, that is not a reason not to work on a coordinated effort for a citywide greenway system. And so the last slide, please. To this end, toward coordination, sorry, I think there's a lag. Are we on the coalition page?
Yeah, we
Okay.
can see it. We can see it.
It's to this end that a citywide coalition of Greenway-aligned organizations recently formed to come together to raise attention, raise awareness, and call for investment, significant investment in the network as a whole. So the groups that are involved in the Upper Manhattan and Bronx environmental justice and environmental quality work that we're talking about today are represented in bold. But as you can see from this list of groups, and the group is growing by the day, literally, we have a really diverse mix of transportation-oriented groups, park and open space-oriented group, waterfront and on-water oriented groups, as well as others that work on community development, environmental justice, and urban development overall. This coalition recently got together and jointly sent a letter to the entire New York City delegation asking for investment in the whole Greenway network throughout the city, and looking at the system as a whole. One of the things that we see is desperately needed is a kind of community driven bottom-up approach that also includes coordination with the multiple city agencies that work on greenways, both in their development and ongoing maintenance, for a New York City Greenways Master Plan as an update to the 1993 Greenway Plan that Dart referenced. And also just as a historic approach to Greenway implementation, we need to change the approach to Greenway implementation that's not reactive and opportunistic, but rather proactive and active in a coordinated effort looking at the whole. Because really we know that greenways can be greater than the sum of their parts. And by looking at the whole system, we can make sure that benefits are delivered for all New Yorkers. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Next slide, Daniel. So one of the incredible things that we have in the Bronx that the rest of New York City doesn't have is we actually have the Urban Waters Federal Partnership. And this might be the first time you're hearing of this partnership before, although this is actually, we're coming up to the 10-year anniversary of the Urban Waters Federal Partnership. And I'm just going to read shortly the mission of this. The Urban Waters Federal Partnership will help urban and metropolitan areas, particularly those that are underserved or economically distressed, connect with their waterfronts and work to improve them. This federal partnership will put communities first. We will help work to break down government program silos and ensure that our collective efforts will reverse past neglect, energize existing programs, and engage new partners. We will listen to, engage, and serve the communities where we work, ensuring that they are full partners in restoring and protecting the waters that surround them. We will establish strong partners with effective community-based organizations, local government officials to make the most effective use of economic incentives and other beneficial actions. With the right set of federal, state, local tools, and local commitment of the political will, the federal partnership will leverage existing neighborhood assets. These actions will be geared to promote early success and visible victories to fuel long-term action. Success will advance the missions of our partnership, our agencies, and the federal government as a whole. Next slide, please. And talking about the 10-year anniversary, here is the Harlem River Working Group with our federal partners. We have Secretary of the Interior here in the front, Ken Salazar, with then Congressman Jose Serrano, at that point, Assembly Member Vanessa Gibson, and the head of the National Park Service was also part of this. And I also like to acknowledge over to the right, we have 3 community board directors, community board 4, 5, and 7, talking about the collaboration that have existed for community members and community organizations trying to get access to this waterfront. Bob Bender should be on the call. I'm not sure if he is, from District 8, who has been a longtime partner of the Harlem River Working Group and trying to make connections in District 8. I also want to say in the background there, trying to hide, as Liam is doing right now, we have Deputy Commissioner Liam Kavanaugh from Parks, and we have Eddie Silverio in front from the Alianza Catholic Charities, and representatives from a lot of our electeds here in this picture, as long as also community partners, principal from the Highbridge Elementary School, Dr. Kong. So this has always been a very large community collaboration, which is exact vision for the Urban Waters Partnership. And as you can see, October 11th is going to be the 10-year anniversary of this celebration here on the waterfront. And we're hoping maybe we can invite our new Secretary of the Interior, who is also the first Indigenous secretary in U.S. history. Can we turn to the next slide? And I'm going to introduce Sarah, who is our Urban Waters Ambassador. Sarah?
Yeah, thanks, Chauncey. Thanks so much. Good afternoon, everyone. As Chauncey said, my name is Sarah Powell. I am the ambassador for our Urban Waters Federal Partnership location. And so, yeah, Chauncey, thanks for that great intro to the program. As he said, you know, this Urban Waters Federal Partnership is an EPA-led initiative that began in 2011. And, you know, he went through the mission, and really the vision of the program is to revitalize urban waters and the communities that surround them by, you know, and have the federal government work together to, as he said, break down our government program silos and establish partnerships with community-based organizations and local governments in order to transform these overlooked, you know, waterways into assets that are really treasured centerpieces of the local communities and drivers of urban renewal. So our location was one of the first ones established. Today there are 20 around the US, and each of them has an ambassador, like myself. Our location is led by the Department of Interior, and locally, our local federal lead is from USGS out of their Water Science Center on Long Island. EPA is also a major federal partner, and I should say that while there are 15 federal agencies that have all signed on to this partnership, all of the agencies are not necessarily involved in each location, or their involvement, you know, the level of their involvement may really vary from location to location, depending on local issues. So other federal agencies that have been really key and participatory in our location to date include Department of Transportation, the Army Corps of Engineers, the U.S. Forest Service, NOAA, FEMA, and HUD. And so as ambassador, my role is really to work to coordinate all of the partners, you know, local communities, NGOs, our federal partners, as well as state and municipal agencies, academic partners. And so to bring all of these entities together to really accelerate and prioritize on the ground, locally led projects that are working to improve water quality, restore green and waterfront spaces, and really foster better coordination amongst all of these entities. So my position is based out of the New York and New Jersey Harbor and Estuary Program, or HEP, which is one of 28 national estuary programs established by the Clean Water Act. And HEP works to protect, conserve, and restore the entire New York and New Jersey Harbor estuary, including, of course, the Bronx and Harlem rivers. So by combining these networks, it really enables the Bronx and Harlem River communities to tap into HEP's wider regional network and technical capacity, as well as additional EPA and partner resources. You can go to the next slide, please. So, you know, as you're all well aware, the Bronx faces a lot of social and environmental justice issues due to decades worth of systemic underinvestment. And in fact, the initial focus of our partnership when it was first established was really primarily on the Bronx River. And so when I was hired as the first full-time official ambassador for this location in 2017, the conscious decision was made to really try to focus more attention onto the Harlem River. And so to that end, I've been engaged for the past 4 years in watershed planning work that has been led by New York City Parks to develop a watershed and natural resources management plan for the Bronx, the Harlem River and the Bronx. And this plan, which was recently completed, really builds off of many previous community planning efforts and involved a lot of people on this call here today. And so this final plan identifies recommendations and priorities to invest in natural resource protection, stormwater management through green infrastructure, ways to improve access and connectivity both between parks and open spaces and to the Harlem River itself, and ways to increase community outreach and education efforts. So I could talk about the plan all day, but I won't do that because we have a lot to cover. But I will just say our partnership, we're excited the plan is done and we're eager to begin moving forward on implementation. So next, you can go to the next slide. I want to quickly highlight 2 examples of the way our partnership has been successful over the last almost 10 years now and really helping to advance community priorities in the Bronx. And so that first project involves Starlight Park on the Bronx River. And, this is a project that I've heard Maggie Greenfield, who is, I believe, on the call. I don't see her window. Oh, there you are. The executive director of the Bronx River Alliance, whom you'll hear from later, say that, without the partnership's involvement, this project really would not have happened. So I just want to set the stage that I think as a program, the Urban Waters Federal Partnership and the way it operates, it's really set up to bring in the capacity of federal agencies to work in a coordinated way to help, solve and advance local issues. So this is a great example because the partnership, and this was well before my time, but they were able to convene partners and facilitate a solution to really a long-standing impasse between the City of New York State, and Amtrak regarding construction of a key piece of the Bronx River Greenway over an Amtrak right-of-way, which is what you see on this map here. So this piece of the Greenway, which, in the early 2000s, the city had already invested nearly a decade in planning and millions in designing and building. This missing piece was really critical. And even by 2009, some state funding had actually expired because all these parties hadn't been able to come to an agreement on how to move forward. There were issues over, who was managing the project, how it was being paid for, some indemnification liability issues. And so in late 2012, then Congressman Serrano called the Department of Interior Secretary to request assistance in getting this project, unstuck and to get it going again. So through the newly instituted Urban Waters Federal Partnership, DOI was able to bring together all the parties and really move them past a place of where, they've been talking about potential litigation to being able to figure out a way to move forward and how to fund this. And then the partnership was able to help the city secure $10 million in DOT Tiger funding, which to date has been leveraged into nearly $60 million of improvements for this park, which you can go to the next slide. And these improvements include construction of 3 pedestrian bridges. They're going to improve access to the Bronx River and green space to an estimated 400,000 people in the Bronx. Investment in resilient shorelines, increasing the size of the park dramatically. And of course, the original goal, closing that key, about 2/3 mile gap in the Bronx River Greenway. So as with all complex capital projects, there's been a lot of different phases and delays. And if you want to go to the next slide for a couple of photos, one of the 2 final pedestrian bridges is actually in the process of going in as we speak. I think Nilka's on this call. Nilka, shout out to you. I stole your picture off of Instagram. It's awesome. But what these photos illustrate is sort of from the left to right, a before, after/during in progress of the work going on in the park. And that picture on the right is very recent. And like I said, of one of the 2 pedestrian bridges going in. So we're really hoping that we're able to, I see Maggie in the chat saying the arch of the bridge went in yesterday. So, we're really hoping that we're going to be able to celebrate completion of this long awaited and truly transformative project for the Bronx soon. And rest assured, you will all be invited to the party, I'm sure, once we're able to celebrate that together. So the next project I want to highlight focuses more on the Harlem River and again, in a different way that our partnership operates. And that is how the Urban Waters Federal Partnership is able to really build connections across disciplines and organizations. So having, scientists and experts from the federal government work in concert with local decision makers and resource managers. And so what I want to talk about these next 2 slides is the way that USGS, as our local federal lead, has been working in partnership over the past few years with multiple different agencies and local partners to collect water quality information, support of waterfront park planning and programming efforts on both rivers, but again, specifically in the Harlem River. So they've been spending a lot of time looking closely at water and sediment quality as it relates to human health questions on the Harlem River. As a new waterfront city park is being planned and designed, that's what you see in this picture here, roughly right in the middle of the Harlem River, just north of the High Bridge. New York City Parks is working on designing and building a new park space. And so again, USGS has been providing some water quality data in support of their planning and design goals. So the next slide shows more photos from the Harlem. And I just want to note too, and along with USGS's investment in water quality monitoring, EPA recently funded a project that's kicking off this summer to implement a newly developed statewide monitoring framework for living shorelines. So given how highly urbanized the Bronx's waterfronts are and the threats they face from sea level rise and climate change, living shorelines have been identified as a research and implementation priority by many of our partners. And so we're excited to begin working this summer on collecting data in support of the community's stated goal of having more living shorelines on the Harlem River and Bronx River, but also to work with local students who will be doing this work so we can really work on training the next generation of environmental leaders from New York City and the Bronx. So these two examples are again, what our local federal lead likes to call actionable science. So it's research that's being done with the user in mind, and the outcome of this work is that information that can be easily and quickly moved directly into decision maker spaces to really benefit local communities. And yep, and you can go to the next slide. And so with that, I just want to, definitely get to the next part of our agenda where you're going to hear from everyone about all of the community partners and their needs and great ongoing work. But I want to sum up and say that I think the strength of the Urban Waters Federal Partnership is really the ability to convene partners in order to add capacity to local projects and needs by bringing in the expertise and directed resources of the federal government in a coordinated way. There's a lot of complicated and big issues facing the Bronx. I include this picture that Dart talked about earlier, because this is a major challenge. Like, how do we get people from the community down safely to the waterfront, given all of these transportation corridors that they have to traverse? So what I'd like to think about the partnership is really a mechanism for continuing to push forward on these community priorities and working to transform, the Harlem River and the Bronx River into assets. And again, getting back to the vision of the partnership, really drivers of urban renewal. So I think our partnership is well poised to continue doing this work under the new administration. And I hope for those of you who weren't familiar with our partnership, this is a helpful overview. I know it was a lot quickly, but my email's here. I'm happy to connect, more offline or answer any questions you might have. So thank you so much for the time. Thanks for organizing, Chauncey. And I think I'm turning it back to you.
Okay, great. Can we go to the next slide? So we're going to start off today with a quick story from one of our longtime residents of the High Bridge neighborhood, Anita Antonetti, who many might know her mother, Evelina Antonetti, the Hell Woman of the Bronx, who did a lot of the community organizing in the 70s and 80s in the Bronx and throughout New York City. Anita, you're having a little problem with your connection, I heard.
And yeah, there's like major construction going on across the street, so my Wi-Fi goes in and out. But right now I'm on my cell phone. I just wanted to say good afternoon to everybody. And I also wanted to say that all of these projects are just wonderful. And thank you, Dart, for the history. But with that history, it's a long time that this side of the Bronx has been neglected, and people and children, especially children, because I was one of those children that jumped the fence on the High Bridge when it was closed to go to swimming in Manhattan, in the pool in Manhattan. But people are still trying to get to the water. And there's a lot of obstacles in the way. And I can say that was years and years ago. And I even remember going to Roberto Clemente State Park and in meetings for the Greenway, and how we were going to have this wonderful park along that we could get to Roberto Clemente from the South Bronx all the way uptown. But my son was 5 years old at that time, and now he's 33 years old. So we need to move on these projects, because people will still go to the river and will still put their lives on the line. So I'm glad all of this is in process. I just hope it, comes true and that we can see it. Thanks.
Thank you, Anita. So this is what it's about. I mean, all of us in all of our projects are working to reclaim our waterfronts and envision a better future for the Bronx, Manhattan, the Harlem River, the Bronx River, the Hutchinson River, the Long Island Sound, the East River. We're trying to reconnect our communities to waterfront. I want to share a little piece of the history of the Harlem River, something that maybe folks think they know and maybe things that folks can learn. So we can get the next slide, please, Daniel. So where is the Harlem River? The Harlem River, for those of you who don't know, because unfortunately I work with all the kids in the High Bridge neighborhood in the Bronx in District 9. Most of our children and a lot of our families don't realize that the Harlem River is the border between the Bronx and Manhattan. Most people also don't know that the Harlem River is not actually a river, but a tidal estuary that connects the Hudson, the East River with the Long Island Sound. There's actually 4 tides on the Harlem River each day, up and down, up and down. And as the salt water comes up, the tide goes up. As the fresh water comes down from the Hudson, the tide goes down. And so as we're getting people on the boats and people out on the water, it's something that we actually have to pay attention to. Something that a lot of rivers, if you're not an estuary, if you're not a tidal strait, you wouldn't have to know about. Next slide, please. So Harlem River has always been a major source of water recreation. Here you have some pictures from the early 1900s. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. The Harlem River was the center of water recreation, not only for New York City, but also for much of the nation. The first recorded rowing race in US history occurred with a New York City rowing crew in 1756. Here's a picture of a race happening on the Harlem River in early 1900. You see the crowd standing on the Harlem River Speedway on the Manhattan side and the beautiful parkway that's on the Bronx side. This is the Washington Bridge. Next slide. While today Boston and Philadelphia are considered centers of rowing and water recreation in New York State, the truth is that New York City's Harlem River rivaled both of these cities with over 50 boathouses on the Harlem River from the 1800s until the 1950s, when Robert Moses built the Deegan Expressway, the Harlem River Drive, and the Cross Bronx Expressway, cutting off communities connected to the waterfront since the beginning of New York City's history. This is the Bronx side near McCombs Dam Bridge. Next slide. The Harlem River Working Group is a coalition of organizations that has been focusing on improving access to and along the Harlem River, which is 9.3 miles from Randall's Island to the Hudson River to the boroughs of Bronx and Manhattan. There's currently very limited public access to open space on the Bronx waterfront, limited partial access on the Manhattan side, no continuous system of bicycle and pedestrian pathways connecting the waterfront to upland communities, and extremely limited boat access. Actually, no publicly accessible boat access, with the exception of Robert Clemente State Park on the Bronx side at all. The Harlem River is working towards restoring the Harlem River, reconnecting the waterfront with the people, reconnecting the water's edge, and reinvigorating in-water recreation commercial activities. I'm not going to read the next, so just next slide, please. An example of what happens with waterfront park development and how it can transform our waterfront and our communities. The picture on the left is the Harlem River waterfront at what was before our mall was built at Mill Pond Park. That was what our waterfront looked like. That was our waterfront properties. And this is an aerial photo of Mill Pond Park taken at the right shortly after the opening of Mill Pond Park in 2009. Mill Pond Park, for folks who don't know, is in Community Board 4 and is one of the most active parks in Community Board 4 at this point because of the recreation spaces. Unfortunately, due to a railroad line that runs along the water in the Harlem River, although we envisioned this as a park that would have boat access, it's not safe. And again, that is going back to what Dart referenced. That railroad line was built in 2000, not in the 1970s. It was completed in 2000. And in 2000, we cut off the Bronx from its waterfront. So this ongoing economic racism and ecological racism to communities of color in the Bronx have been going on for decades and are still going on today. Fresh Direct, which Michael will talk about, a property just north of Robert Clemente State Park, 40 acres of land that was purchased by a private developer that we had been trying to get federal, state, and city officials to purchase to develop the connection to Van Cortlandt Park and the Putnam line that Van Cortlandt Park Alliance will be talking about in a moment. These are things that are happening every day in the Bronx, and why we need to come together as a coalition in the Bronx and Upper Manhattan to stop this from happening, because together we can make change. As individual organizations fighting in our neighborhoods, we're only going to be doing scarcity politics, fighting against each other for limited funds. We really need to unite our forces and together make change. Next slide, please. And I'm just going to close with, this is another parking community board for. We have other partners that are going to be talking about campaigns on the waterfront. This is Depot Place and Bridge Park South. This is an early plan from over 10 years ago that would include waterfront access, a boat dock, and a large garden space for community. Currently, we have about $4 million that we're using to renovate Bridge Park South. It's not enough to make these amenities. It is going to be a passive park at this point with a greenway alongside. But with additional funds, we could transform this into another boathouse on the waterfront. We actually only have one boathouse currently active on the Manhattan side, and hopefully we will have two again soon, but no boathouses or ways to get on the water outside of the ramp on Robert Clemente State Park. So I'm going to pass it over to our friends, Michael from South Bronx Unite. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chauncey. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. I mean, this is a very important topic. I believe it's really about quality of life and, of course, equity. South Bronx Unite created a waterfront plan with our community. We looked at the lack of having access to the peninsula that surrounds us, but yet we have highways that surround us. We have industrial sidings that surrounds us, but we have the least quantity of green space in the entire city. The Bronx, as you all know, have some of the greatest quantity of green spaces in the city, but we have one park for about 60,000 people. Next slide, please. Next slide, thank you, right here. So what we've done, we just, we activate our community around some of the things that we need to do to create our own opportunities for change. We've seen how top-down decision-making is not really related to actual quality of life enhancements for us. We are one, of course, you all know, we're in one of the most economically oppressed communities in the country, but we were hit extremely hard by COVID because of our pre-existing health conditions. Because of the built environment is overweighing the natural environment, it leads us to have to create our own solutions. We're here today to talk about how we can work together, hopefully, to create these solutions. Our waterfront plan is an option, is an idea of how we can not only create green space, we can not only create resiliency because we're in a flood zone, we can also create jobs and economic opportunities for our community. Green space can be job creative, but the plan has come from the community, and all this montage of photos is where when we brought people together, either for environmental justice waterfront tours or James walks, or this community coming together to celebrate themselves around, let's create our own opportunities. Next slide, please. So the Mount Haven Port Morris Waterfront Plan receives the only prioritized waterfront opportunity ever in this community. In 2016, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation prioritized a 7-point or position plan for access to green space and the creation of a resilient waterfront, but access for people who live in this district. where you see in that photo, St. Mary's Park sit there, but there's also the highest concentration of public housing, and of course, again, those highway systems. Our peninsula is one of the largest significant maritime industrial areas in the city, which really prohibits any access for community to get to that peninsula. When we go to students in our classrooms, in our district, in our area, we ask them about the waterfront. They have no idea it even exists because there's no accessibility to it. We feel that there cannot be here in the richest country in the world, the richest city in the world, there's such inequities exist in our district, in our community, in our borough, in our city. Next slide, please. So our waterfront plan shows what currently there is on the left. As you see at the Port Morris Gantries and 132nd Street Pier, we call it. Here before there was a floating barge pool at that lower left photo back in the early 1900s. In 1986, there was an explosion, destroyed the pier. It still sits in the ruins. And a charred pier still sits there some 40 years later. It's really something that you have to feel and see. We need to we're willing to do waterfront tours to show the existence of why we had to create a waterfront plan and why these areas are so important to the communities and members of Mott Haven and Port Morris specifically, but for the entire Bronx. Anywhere there's inequity like this, we all are suffering socially. What we plan and propose are renderings you see to the right, are working in collaboration with institutions like UPenn, Penn Design, MIT, Rutgers, Syracuse. There's a lot of plans, but we're trying to create different outcomes here. Go to the next slide, please. Sorry. What we see here is Lincoln Avenue and Alexander Avenue. This is what the peninsula looks like. If you look at the bulkheads, they've deteriorated over decades, have no type of plan to rehabilitate those bulkheads to protect the community from storm surge. During Sandy, 4 feet of water breached our shores here and actually created a real disaster at low tide. Had we been hit at high tide, it'd have been a total different situation. I think we may have lost much more cost of not doing this there than it is to do it. Our waterfront plan is vital to the survival of the people in our community. Not just, and for protecting us from all the things that are on our peninsula, from the waste transfer stations to the peaker power plants, to the New York Post and Wall Street Journal, to the 800,000 square foot Fresh Direct facility. All of this is public land, and the spaces along our waterfront plan are publicly owned spaces that are underutilized, which makes sense to create something better for our community. Next slide, please. So what we're trying to do, our community needs partnership with our Bronx delegation to right the wrong of this inequity. We all know it exists, but there's a time now that we can do something different. With this new administration, the Biden administration is focused on environmental justice. When you think of environmental justice, you have to think about the South Bronx. And we have to do something when you have 60,000 people have one park, but shouldering all the burden for everything else that the city requires, such as fossil fuel power plants, waste transfer stations, and heavy diesel truck intensive businesses. Let's work together and create a different outcome for our community. Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to turn it over to our partner with the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance.
Hi there. Thanks for having us here today. I'm Stephanie Ehrlich, and I am the Van Cortlandt Park Administrator and the Executive Director of the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance.
I'm Christina Taylor, Director of Programs and Operations for the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance. And next slide, please. So the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance preserves, supports, and promotes the recreational, ecological, and historical value of Van Cortlandt Park. And we do that through a variety of ways, some of which you can see here: environmental education programs, community stewardship, research projects, maintenance of the natural areas, internships for high school students. We do a little bit of everything in our park. Next slide, please.
And as you can see, Van Cortlandt Park is huge. It is 1,146 acres in the northwest corner of the Bronx. And although it is not located at a waterfront, it does have water flowing through it. And as was mentioned, thank you, Chauncey, there's water coming to us from the north. And also just to highlight that this park serves over 2.5 million people per year. And we have everything that we're all talking about here. There's a greenway, a brand new greenway in the park. We have opportunities for alternative transportation in Van Cortlandt Park. There are water quality issues and stormwater management issues in the park. And of course, our good friend Robert Moses also cut up Van Cortlandt Park so that the Deegan and the Henry Hudson Parkway make it impossible to go from east to west, west to east within the park. So there, in our master plan, there are plans for bridges that we could use support for creating the bridges that connect the two sides of the park. Next slide, please. This is the southwest corner of Van Cortlandt Park, and we're focusing on this because this is a large part of where the water is coming through the park. And you can see there is a long stream of blue there, and that does not currently exist. That is where we would be looking to do some daylighting within the park. Next slide. So this is the current weir at the lake in Van Cortlandt Park, and where the arrows are, you can see that this is where the water comes through the weir and goes down to the combined sewer system in New York City. Next slide.
So this slide shows the current area that is the CSX property that ties both daylighting and the Putnam Trail. So ideally, we would like to see Tibbetts Brook be daylit here, and then next to it, a greenway that would connect the Putnam Greenway, which is also part of the Empire State Trail, to the Harlem River Greenway. Next slide.
And at the very, very southern corner of Van Cortlandt Park, we have a WPA stadium, which is a beautiful historic building, but it is in incredible state of disrepair and would benefit from attention. Next slide. And speaking of history, this is a set of beautiful historic red steps that are in the park, and they are also in disrepair. You can see at the very top there is Van Cortlandt House Museum, which is the oldest house in the Bronx. It was built in 1748. These steps date from the early 20th century. And you can see that there is a little white circle in front there that is a millstone. This was, Van Cortlandt Park was originally, well, not originally, but it was a plantation that was owned by the Van Cortlandt family, and they used the millstone to grind wheat to become grain, and that is the millstone. Next slide. A big part of what we are looking to do in Van Cortlandt Park in the immediate future is talk about the enslaved people who lived and worked in Van Cortlandt Park. And this connects to the waterway. As you can see, that is the lake. We're hoping to change the name of it to honor the enslaved people who actually built the lake. And that is a real special thing that we have in the park, which is that there are features that were built by enslaved people that are still visible to visitors now. And the lake, AKA Hester and Piero's Mill Pond, is one of those features, as is the house. Next slide.
Another section of the park that we would like to look at is the Bronx-Yonkers border. So that yellow line there is the northern end of the park, which completely borders Yonkers and Westchester County. So once you step out of the park there, you're in another county. And it has kind of led to it to become a no man's land where no one wants to take responsibility for it. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that a lot of the border of the park is actually fenced off with small opening, so it's not very welcoming, and that community doesn't really see it as their backyard park, which they should. And then this on the other side is the Broadway in the very end there. So this is the first thing if people are driving down Broadway and coming into the Bronx, this is how they get welcomed to the Bronx, which we would like to make this more welcoming and more appealing for people to first see as the first thing they see for our park. Next slide, please. So Tibbetts Brook starts in Westchester County and comes into Van Cortlandt Park. And we do, unfortunately, because of that, have some water quality issues because of the aging infrastructure in Yonkers. This is a stormwater drain that unfortunately we've had discharges into it that are things other than stormwater because of the old infrastructure that they have and the cracks. The sewage leaks into the stormwater, unfortunately. So we would like to see funding go to Westchester to improve their infrastructure so that we don't have these impacts in the Bronx. Next slide. So thank you all for listening to some of the many things that we would like to see happen in Van Cortlandt Park. Do check us out sometime. Thank you.
So we're now going to welcome two important on-water partners, the Harlem River Community Rowing and Row New York.
Thank you, Chauncey. This is Bob Barnett. I'm president of Harlem River Community Rowing. I'm going to start out with this, kind of reiterating some of Chauncey's remarks about the importance of the Harlem River to rowing. The historic importance of the rivers is rooted in the fact that it is the birthplace of rowing in the United States and arguably the world. Rowing, contrary to contemporary perceptions, was a working man's sport. If you think about New York, we're a series of islands. Up until the late 1800s, we didn't really have that many bridges, so that we were dependent on boats of all dimension, both for commerce and for public transportation. Hence, that's how the development of rowing started out in terms of competitive rowers, and it found its home on the Harlem River. The other thing that's rather significant about rowing, it was the first spectator sport in the United States. As you can see there, the bridges and the waterfront there would be masses of people who would come to watch competitive boats and regattas. It was known for heavy betting, and also that oftentimes there would be crews that would be paid off to throw races. But it was indeed a very major recreational sport and also spectator sport. For all of Robert Moses's destructive impact, rowing has never gone away from the Harlem River and is now experiencing a resurgence on the river with clubs such as my own Harlem River Community Rowing and with Row New York. And with that, I'm going to pass this on to Rachel. The new change slide.
Hi, thanks, Bob. So I'm Rachel Citron, the Executive Director of Row New York, and these are some pictures of some of our participants on the Harlem River. Row New York provides access to the sport of rowing to youth and adults inclusive of background or ability. Over 80% of our participants are people of color. The sport is kind of thought of as a very exclusive and white sport and sport of privilege, but really part of our mission is to bring sport of rowing to the youth of New York City. And to that end, we have locations in Queens, in Flushing Meadow Park, in Brooklyn off Farragut Bay Basin, and relevant to this call, on the Manhattan side of the Harlem River in Washington Heights. And in terms of our programs, we serve 250 students in a youth program, which uses rowing and the teamwork and work ethic developed in rowing to help students graduate high school and college. And we also serve over 300 young people with physical or developmental disabilities. And we also have a veterans program and some programming that's really offered to the entire community in terms of helping anyone in the community learn to row and try the sport. And we really believe it's vital for all of our rowers to have access to water, access to open space that the river provides, and access to nature. And it's kind of obvious that rowing is beneficial to physical health, but we also know, and our participants tell us quite frequently, that access to the water and nature is beneficial to their mental health. We have future plans with a new boathouse on the Harlem River, which will be steps from our existing one. That'll be opening in 2023. And that new boathouse will support expanding our youth programming And the boathouse will also be universally accessible and will allow us to expand our services to people with disabilities. Thanks, and I'll turn it back to Bob. And the next slide.
Okay, I just want to kind of follow up on Rachel's remarks. Talk about a little bit about Harlem River Community Rowing. We're a 15-year-old all-volunteer rowing organization offering accessible, affordable rowing to the greater New York community. And we've drawn participants from 4 of the 5 boroughs, as well as visitors from overseas abroad. We complement Row New York by providing adult, recreational, and competitive rowing, starting with our Learn to Row program, helping out with novices, and then with master rowers of all ages and backgrounds, again, drawing from all communities that are available to us. We've actually participated, we've offered programs on both sides of the Harlem River. We originally started at Roberto Clemente State Park on the Bronx side. We are now based out of the Muskota Marsh Dock in Inwood on the Manhattan side. Our long-term goal and plan is to identify a location for the development of a community boathouse so we can expand our programming to include such as offering programming in Spanish, as well as specialized programming for vets. And also to continue our commitment to championing the Harlem River as New York's most underappreciated and utilized recreational resource. Thanks, Chauncey. Back to you.
Thank you. And a plug for Row New York and Harlem River Community Rowing. My daughter actually got a $300 scholarship to school because she was a rower with Row New York and Harlem River Community Rowing. So it really does change children's and families' lives getting out on the water. And Harlem River Community Rowing has one of the highest graduation rates for college classes from students that stay in the Harlem River Community Rowing through their high school years. So really incredible programs, both of them, and folks should check it out. So our next program is Bronx River Alliance, which I don't think we can say enough about.
Hi, everyone. Well, there's so much we could say about all of it, Chauncey, and thank you, everyone. I feel like I've just learned a lot. I really appreciated that history of the Harlem River. Some of it was new to me, so thank you all. So I'm Maggie Greenfield. I'm both the executive director of the nonprofit Bronx River Alliance and also the Bronx River administrator for New York City Parks Department. And so that title really represents this partnership that's always been at the heart of our efforts to protect, improve, and restore the Bronx River so that it can be a healthy resource for the communities through which it flows. And of course, you know, we work very closely with New York City Parks Department to build our parks and clean up the shoreline. And we also, you know, really grew out of community activism for the river, which was centered in the South Bronx around the environmental justice movement, which got going in the late 1990s. But really, we work also with all levels of government, and federal government has been essential. It's been a key piece of what has made any of our successes possible on the Bronx River. So really thanks to the efforts of our elected officials. And it's so great to be able to get to know our new generation of elected officials here today. And also for the Federal Urban Waters Partnership, which, as Sarah was mentioning earlier, helped us unstick a really difficult, stuck project on the Bronx River Greenway. And I feel confident can unstick many more of these projects on the Harlem River and in the South Bronx and in McCortland Park and all over our beautiful borough. And together on the Bronx River, we've achieved a lot together working in these partnerships. We've opened up 20 new acres of waterfront parkland in the South Bronx, and we've turned a a concrete plant that you can see there that is now a beautiful waterfront park. We've also transformed it a trash-strewn, abandoned street end into Hunts Point Riverside Park, and a former manufactured gas plant site into Starlight Park, which is where River House is now. So these projects are difficult. They are not easy. They need attention from high levels of government to help us get past obstacles that inevitably come up. But success is really possible. And so thank you to, really all the partnerships. There's been so many, and shout out to BCEQ, which is one of the founding partners of the Bronx River Alliance, and so many good efforts around the borough as well. So I'm going to stop talking now. I'm going to turn it over to Claudia Ibaven, who is our Director of Special Projects. She's going to talk about a few things on the Greenway that need attention. Claudia, on to you.
Thank you, Maggie, and thank you everyone for sharing your time with me and with the Bronx River Alliance. My name is Claudia Ibaven. I'm the Director of Special Projects at the Bronx River Alliance, and I'm just going to share with you a couple of projects along the Bronx River Greenway. So first, we want to ask for your support, representatives here, to help us plan, design, and construct a missing link in the Bronx River Greenway in Yonkers and Mount Vernon. If we have anyone from Congressman Bowman's office, this is part of your district, but we know that the Greenway also serves the entire region. The Bronx River Greenway is a 23-mile long ribbon of green space with a multi-use path that will extend the full length of the Bronx River. We have a 1.5-mile missing link between Westchester and the Bronx. And our goal is really to open up the Bronx River so that way communities who have been severely lacking open space and waterfront access can really use this space as a space for recreation, for mental health, and for non-motorized transportation. These are also places that are vital for people to gather, for also to people to gather during a pandemic that it was much needed this past year. So again, we want definitely to ask your support and maybe possibly meet with you to explain further details about this project and how to move it forward. Next slide, please. Is it my screen that froze?
Yeah, we can see the slide
We
now.
see you. It's fine.
You can keep talking now, Beth.
Okay. So we are also asking for your support to develop the community vision created in the Shoelace Master Plan. We ask us to help us secure funding for design and construction for the vision of this plan. Again, Congresswoman, this is part of the district. But again, we know that the Bronx River Greenway also serves the entire region. As we have heard before from our other partners, we know that the Bronx and the Bronx River have been severely impacted by racist highway development. This is part of Robert Moses' legacy. We have to call his name out as much as we can. The creation of the parkway straightened the Bronx River Parkway really straightened the river and left the 1.5-mile long park with a skinny green space and a leftover roadbed. The Alliance ensures that Bronx residents join this process of designing how parks will be designed and how they will be implemented. And the development of the Shoelace Master Plan really reflects this emphasis on broad inclusion and community participation. We again seek your support to really making the vision of the Bronx River, of the Shoelace Master Plan a reality, a vision that will improve the health of the river and its ecology, but it will also address community needs. And again, we can definitely meet with you to discuss further the Shoelace Master Plan and how to move this project forward. Now I'm going to pass it out to Michelle, and she's going to tell us a little bit more about the water quality issues that we have on the Bronx River.
Thank you, Claudia. My name is Michelle Lupke. I'm the Director of Environmental Stewardship for the Bronx River Alliance. Thank you so much for having us with you today. And what I'm talking about affects the districts of Bowman, Torres, Ocasio-Cortez, and then Senators Schumer and Gillibrand. So you've already heard from our friends at Van Cortlandt Park about Tibbetts Brook. So I'd like to draw your attention to the other affected water bodies indicated on this map. So The problem is, in violation of Clean Water Act standards, untreated sewage from failing infrastructure in Westchester County, particularly in Mount Vernon and Yonkers, continues to pollute the Bronx River and Hutchinson's rivers with high levels of fecal bacteria, which flow through the Bronx to the Long Island Sound. So this not only jeopardizes the health and integrity of the ecosystems of the Bronx River, but also of the Long Island Sound and the greater New York Harbor and Atlantic Ocean as a whole. We seek your support with federal funding to repair these municipal sewage collection systems to stop this chronic pollution source. If there is an interest in putting together an earmark or other funding requests, the Bronx River Alliance and Save the Sound both have large multi-year data sets that document the extent of this problem and are happy to provide those or any other support documentation to help with that request. And as you can see from the image on the screen, this is an outfall. I believe you've seen outfalls before where people are saying, yes, we know there's sewage coming out of it. This is toilet paper. So yes, we know there is sewage coming out of this. It continues to be a problem. We know that they are Clean Water Act violations. We have the data to document it. We need your support at the federal and the state levels to please help us in dealing with this issue. It is a larger infrastructure issue in Westchester County that is causing pollution to flow downstream to our environmental justice communities in the Bronx. And this is what we are seeking to repair. And we would like your assistance with that. So thank you very much. Appreciate it on behalf of everyone who lives within our watershed. Cheers.
Thank you so much. And I think this is an issue that I think everyone stands in unity with Bronx River Alliance, as was mentioned, even in Van Cortlandt Parks Alliance. Could we have next slide, please? We also have our contact from Bowman's office. Thank you so much. We're going to have a moment for folks to share momentarily, but we have a few more folks that we want to hear from. And that's the next, our partners at Transportation Alternatives from both Bronx and Manhattan sides. Lucia?
Hi, thanks, Chauncey. Thanks, everyone, for your time. My name's Lucia, and I am a resident of Mount Hope in the West Bronx and the campaign lead for TA's Washington Bridge for People campaign. So the Washington Bridge, distinct from the GWB, connects Washington Heights to the West Bronx at West 181st Street. It's the only 24/7 pedestrian and cyclist accessible Harlem River crossing for miles. 5 bus routes with nearly 37,000 riders cross this bridge daily. So car-free access to the bridge is vital because the vast majority of residents of Upper Manhattan and the West Bronx don't drive. For example, in CB5, where I live, only 11% of residents have access to a personal vehicle, and many of them are essential workers. Currently, the bridge is configured for 6 lanes of car traffic and 2 very narrow shared sidewalks. As you can see in the photos, the path is only 3.5 feet wide in sections, so folks have to shimmy by one another to pass. Definitely no social distancing. The pavement is cracked, uneven, and at night it's really poorly lit. So in order to better connect Upper Manhattan and Bronx communities via our network of greenways, DOT in 2018 recommended reconfiguring this bridge to add a 2-way protected bike lane. And more recently, DOT has also proposed installing bus lanes on this bridge. But while improvements are being made to surrounding areas, the plans to reconfigure the Washington Bridge still lacks funding. With bike share expanding uptown, priority bus treatments happening on streets flowing into the bridge, and with widespread community support for better public transit and micromobility options, the need for space for car-free alternatives on the bridge will only increase. So therefore, Transportation Alternatives is urgently calling on our elected representatives to prioritize funding and push for these DOT recommended improvements so that we can transform the Washington Bridge into a people-centered bridge. Thank you.
Thank you. Next slide.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dimitri, and I am part of the Manhattan Activist Committee of Transportation Alternatives. Today, I will be talking about the southern end of the Empire Trail. A little bit of background, the governor announced the completion of the 750-mile Empire State Trail last December. This included the completion of 58 projects by state and local partners, 180 miles of newly created trail, and 400 miles of previously disconnected trails that were linked to eliminate gaps. As you can see from the graph on the left, part of the southern portion includes the Hudson River Greenway and basically an on-road route which connects to the Van Cortlandt Park Greenway. This section passes through the Kingsbridge neighborhood, but there is currently no dedicated safe path for pedestrians and bicyclists. The only one of the ways you can actually cross into the Bronx from Washington Heights is utilizing a small path on the lower level of the Henry Hudson Parkway. So as you can see from the graph on the right, one of the most feasible scenario is to dedicate some of that space to basically have a greenway, which would separate bicyclists from pedestrians. This would give an opportunity to connect the Hudson River Greenway with the Van Cortlandt Park by rededicating space that was over-designed for private vehicles. Closing this gap would have a potential to create a continuous park corridor, which would further upgrade the Empire Trail and would provide a long missing connection between Manhattan and the Bronx. So we urge your help on this issue. This doesn't really require a lot of funding. The space is there. It's just a rededication of space. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Dimitri, and thank you, Lucia. We are going to move to the next slide, please. Okay, the Hutchinson River. Is our presenter ready for the Hutchinson River Restoration Project?
Call. He's there.
Carl.
Okay, there I am.
You're muted. Okay. Okay.
Okay,
We hear you
Karen,
now.
do you have the?
Now we can hear you.
Oh, okay. All right. The Hutchinson River is a very, well, I don't want to say strange river. It's multitasks. It starts off in Scarsdale from Underground Springs, and through Scarsdale down into just before Mount Vernon. It runs through people's backyards. It's pretty clean. People really care about the river there. There are parts of it like between New Rochelle and Eastchester where they have this Lake Innisfree, which is used for recreational boating, swimming, fishing. But when you get down into Mount Vernon was basically designed by the Army Corps of Engineers to be a commercial waterway. In the Bronx, the river goes past Pelham Bay Park, goes into Eastchester Bay. But once you get it above I-95 and the I-95 overpass, it becomes heavily industrialized. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, actually dredged this out to straighten it out so the barges could go up there because the leaders of Mount Vernon wanted to compete with New York City. So historically, there have been cement plants up there. I actually worked in a stone yard that was up there, used to get barges of materials delivered to it. There were all kinds of industrial sites. There are gas tanks along the way. And this picture here, I took Easter Sunday. I happened to go up there. You can see the hutch all the way to the left. This is looking towards the Bronx. This is at the Target Shopping Center. It was built a few years ago. It's on East Sanford Boulevard in Mount Vernon. This is the parking structure, and that's the bank of the hutch. People just throw garbage and trash right through the opening there. The openings have no grates on it. They have no glazing or anything. It's very isolated from the rest of the shopping center. When I went through there, I had free range. I walked through there. I had nobody stopped me. Nobody questioned me being there. You can actually get to the shoreline by going under the underpass from the Hutchinson River Parkway, where I took some of the pictures. But the trash is the least of the problems. This can be cleaned up. We can, get our cleanup crews out there and do things. But the main problems are the other companies that have businesses up along here are dumping all kinds of things in there. Karen, can you show us the next slide? I took a walk around. Usually we kayak up there. We have some members that kayak up there, and they see all the problems on the shoreline. But what I wanted to do was walk in the back there behind Target out towards Fulton Avenue for South Fulton Street, just to see what was along there. And it's incredible the amount of businesses. Okay. This is under the overpass, the entrance to the Hutch coming from the Target shopping center. People live here. They've set up here. The homeless people are here all the time. We noticed that in the Bronx part too, underneath the Hutchinson River Parkway overpass. There's signs of people living there. This is not acceptable, and not on their part. It's unacceptable that the elected officials that we're here to talk with have not found a problem, have not found a way to solve this problem. So they're living there, and the water is not safe because of all this other stuff that's going into it. I think the next picture, if you see that, was a picture taken by one of our members who kayaked up there and noticed the oil coming from this old oil refinery that still seems to be in business. It forms a slick on there. But on top of that, Mount Vernon has some of the oldest infrastructure for sewage, probably in the city, maybe in the state. Here it is, there's the oil slicks here coming from the facility in the back there. The facilities are there, they're just dumping all kinds of toxic waste in there. The sewage systems, which Mount Vernon is trying to improve, still has raw sewage going into there. One of our members who happens to be on this call, Adji Henderson, was an environmentalist and did kayak up here. She says the stench coming from this is incredible. One of our other members, Amelia Ziano from Co-op City, says the same thing. Nothing has been done about it. We're a hidden gem that has just been completely neglected for decades. So one of the things we want to do, we're working right now with our state senator, Alessandro Biaggi, and also the new mayor of Mount Vernon, Sean Patterson Howard. We've had 2 meetings with them already to see what we can do here. But until this section of it is addressed, it is not safe for all the activities that go on. People boat in here, they fish, people eat the fish that comes out of here. People swim in these waters. In the Bronx side, it seems like it's safe enough because you don't see this. I mean, it really is hidden from by the businesses and the highways. They think it's safe in the Bronx, but it's not. We know that the fecal levels are extremely high. We've been working with Save the Sound, and I do want to echo what Michelle from the Bronx River Alliance said earlier. The same problems that they found in the Bronx River are the same things that we have going on in the Hutch. It is a tidal estuary. It's got fresh water coming from up north, but right where it comes into the Bronx, it mixes together. And you have the communities of City Island there, you have Throgs Neck. There's an organization on City Island now, the City Island Oyster Reef Project, that's been trying to get this cleaned up and bring the oyster industry back to City Island. But that's mostly on the east side of it, actually on the Long Island Sound. The part that we're talking about is on the interior part, actually flows near Orchard Beach. So there's just a lot of problems here. We don't want projects like some of the other groups have said. We want to see this restored to its natural beauty. We have the Thomas Pell Wildlife Sanctuary that is part of Pelham Bay Park that this flows next to. What we'd like to see there is nature trails. And access is one of the other things. This is hidden from the world. You can go up the Hutchinson River Parkway and have no idea that you're riding along an actual river called the Hutchinson River. If you come across it going into Pelham Bay Park or going to Co-op City, you have no idea. People in Co-op City have no idea that they're living on the Hutchinson River, even though it's right out their window. So we need access. We need more information about it. We need information to get out there. I'm sorry I didn't have a better presentation prepared. I've been going sideways with a lot of things, but I did put in the chat here, and let me just send this. We have links to the
Okay, Carl, we
Thank
need
you
to
so-
move on. We need to move on. Right, thank you.
Thank you so
That's
much,
it. Yeah,
Carl.
that's
That's really important information, and I think this is something we want to bring more attention to. The Hutchinson doesn't get as much attention as some of our other rivers, so that's really important. Thank you so much. We're going to transition to our next presenter,
No,
Trust
wait,
for
before
Public
we
Land.
before we get to that, could we do Nilka, because we kind of missed her?
Oh, how did that happen? Yes, Nilka.
I don't know.
I don't know how that happens.
I don't know either.
Good afternoon to you all. Thank you so much to BCQ for putting this together. My name is Nilka Martel. I'm the founder of an organization called Loving the Bronx. We are dedicated to community building and organizing around social and environmental justice issues through the use of parks and open spaces. I don't have any visuals for you because we're going to talk about the Cross Bronx, and everyone on this call should be familiar with the Cross Bronx Expressway. Created in the 1950s by the infamous Robert Moses, the highway has negatively impacted us since its inception. Our air quality has made the Bronx the unhealthiest county in New York State. As we are all aware, the asthma rates in the Bronx are the highest in the United States. While much funding has gone to tackling the symptoms, we need to get to the root of the problem. The Cross Bronx is not just an asthma alley. It physically divides existing communities while it destroyed others just to be created. A few years ago, Loving the Bronx was able to successfully advocate for a $10 million reconstruction grant for Virginia Park and Hugh Grant Circle. This got us thinking about the below grade portion of the Cross Bronx that exists between Virginia Park and Virginia Playground. While you're in either of the park or the playground, you're simply breathing in the fumes of the trucks that are traveling through the Cross Bronx. With no budget, we started activating the community around the idea of alternatives for the Cross Bronx. And fortunately for us, in 2018, a group of doctors published a case study called The Cost Effectiveness of Capping Freeways for Use as Parks, the New Cross Bronx Expressway. The case study identifies 2.4 miles of the Cross Bronx that exist completely below grade that can be easily capped. Though we have been working on this for some years, recently we gained some momentum. Last week, Congressman Richie Torres tweeted his support for this project, directing that tweet to President Biden. And earlier today, our Assemblywoman Reyes also tweeted her support and submitted a letter to both Senators Gillibrand and Schumer. This is probably the shortest ask that you're ever going to hear, but I'm sure
There's a picture. There's a picture.
There you go. Thank you. But I'm sure that we can all agree that the Cross Bronx is a major contributor to the health of our borough. So I ask that this project to cap the 2.4 miles that exist below grade for the use of parks and open spaces to be considered with some priority to stitch communities, to reduce the noise and the air pollution, and to create more parkland. The Bronx has suffered way too long, and the time is now. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Nilka.
And Nilka, my apologies. I actually spent time making a slide for you today, and somehow somebody deleted it. So I'm sorry. You were supposed to go immediately after South Bronx Unite, and somebody by mistake must have deleted your slide.
Right. Thank you, Chauncey. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and if it's not in the slide, it just, we skip through. So my apologies about that. It's very important. The South Bronx and the Cross Bronx Expressway, certainly the clearest example of Robert Moses's destruction of the South Bronx. So Trust for Public Land is next.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm learning so much here. My name is Tiffany Briery. I'm from the Trust for Public Land. I'm the program manager for our New York City Playgrounds program, which has been partnering with the DOE and the School Construction Authority for over 20 years to renovate over 200 schoolyards across the 5 boroughs. We've partnered with the New York State Parks through the Vital Brooklyn Project to add green playgrounds to Central Brooklyn, and the Lower Manhattan Resiliency Project for a couple of playgrounds in Lower Manhattan. And we've renovated about 30 sites in the Bronx and have upcoming projects that I'll share with you in a moment. We've been very lucky to have the support of the Bronx Borough President and many Bronx Council members through the years to help fund these projects. And since 2013, we've had a wonderful partnership with the Department of Environmental Protection to capture stormwater in our schoolyards by incorporating green infrastructure in our student-led playground designs. This has allowed us to not only increase the health benefits of our playgrounds by adding more trees and gardens, but it's allowed us to protect the vital waterways we've been hearing about today by capturing millions of gallons of stormwater every year at each of these sites. The site pictured here on the right is on Hollywood Ave in the Bronx, and it's our largest to date at about 2 acres. That turf field there keeps over 1 million gallons of water out of the sewer system when it rains and snows each year, preventing combined sewage overflow into the waterways of the Bronx. Next slide, please. The cornerstone of our program is our 3-month participatory design process in which students are trained as mini landscape architects. They do things like map their existing site conditions, they survey their entire school for the desired amenities at that site. And as you can see here, they learn about green infrastructure and New York City's water challenges through the sewer in a suitcase model. And they decide where to put the green infrastructure elements in their design so they can be part of the solution. They work in teams to lay out design ideas, and then their whole school community votes on the winning design, which we then build and celebrate at a ribbon cutting ceremony when the playground opens. Once the playground opens, these playgrounds serve science teachers as a great jumping off point to teach students about environmental challenges facing NYC and our waterways. And we support continued lessons on CSOs and other environmental education and stewardship topics. Next slide. So here's a before picture of a site that will go into construction, which is usually about 3 or 4 months this summer, and open in early 2022. And you'll see in the next slide, the schematic that the students came up with. Oops, did we skip one? I think we might have skipped one. Can we go back one? Can we go back one slide? Oh, okay, maybe there's just one missing. Okay, maybe 2 forward. We might only get.
That's all we got, sorry.
Okay, that's all right. So there, you can, I'll put a link to to a site where you can see some of our schematic designs that the students actually came up with. But you'll see there's lots of green infrastructure elements like a green roof gazebo, turf field, trees, gardens. The students also design art for the ground that they choose on a theme. And this before picture is a project that we're starting design at in the fall, the Bronx Latin campus. There's actually 4 different schools at this site. And you can see how it's in need of some greening and recreational amenities. But I'll leave it there. We've loved partnering with the Bronx River Alliance at CS 300 in Prospect Ave. That's a past project. They came in and did some environmental education with us during the design process. We're grateful for all of our Bronx partners, and it's been great to learn from you today. Thanks so much.
Okay, and we are going to close out with our last presenter for the evening, president of the Bronx Council for Environmental Quality, and then we're going to open it up, and we'd love to hear from our elected officials, and we also have some of the members of the Urban Waters Federal Partnership on the call. Just thoughts and thinking about next steps. So Robert?
Chauncey, thanks so much. And I want to say this has been a fantastic convening and hearing all the work that our partners and our community-based organizations are doing. And it just makes me put things in perspective a little bit. And the Bronx Council of Environmental Quality today is here also marking 50 years as an environmental advocacy organization. And you've heard about some of the projects that we started. But I wanted to put that moment of the 1970s in perspective a little bit, since Michael and Nilka and Chauncey have talked about Landscape by Moses. In a lot of ways, we are still living in a landscape by Moses and Ford. And what I mean by that is when Gerald Ford told the city to drop dead. And it started an era of austerity. New York City, in turn, told the Bronx to drop dead. And a lot of what you're hearing today, if you represent a federal representative, is the determination of the Bronx people to bring back the Bronx. And in a lot of ways, the Bronx is here, and it's because people wanted it to be here. And we hope you hear loud and clear that we have been on a steady march from that nadir, let's say, when BECQ came into existence at the intersection of that urban crisis that I mentioned before, but also the environmental crisis. And we actually had a built-in connection to the federal government by way of water quality and air quality federal legislation that we all know you recognize as having instrumental impacts on our urban environments. But now as we turn to this challenge of building greenways, I just wanted to remind our federal friends and representatives here that we are still dealing with the damage done to our human capital and our physical environment. And the Bronx is ranked 62 out of 62 counties in health outcomes in New York State. It is the lowest, at the highest percentage of poverty in our state. And measured as almost as an index of wealth and privilege, we have the least access to water. Consider how you value communities and how people value their communities, invest in their communities. A report by the Urban Waters Federal Partnership said that the Bronx actually has the least access. So, and I say this because our needs may be for greenways and they may be for parks, but all these needs are intersectional for transportation, for health, for COVID relief. And what we ask you is to think about the environmental and greenway needs we present today as intersectional and multi-purpose, in the sense that there's places where the federal government now is recognizing that the Bronx is in a crisis. I don't need to tell you about our COVID casualties. But you see it every day, that there are so many ways that that the federal government needs to re-up and reinvest in our borough. Now, just to bring you to a couple more specific things that our partners here have spoken about today. We can't say enough about the watershed plan that was created by New York City DPR with support of Urban Waters Federal Partnership. What that tells us is that the Bronx is sitting on a natural world. Our friends from the Hutch told us about the environment underneath our feet that we don't even know about. But there is a watershed, and it can be made daylight through green infrastructure projects. So we're asking for you to take a look at that plan and think about ways that we can start to knit those green infrastructure needs into not only our communities, but also into our connections to our greenway. Bronx Council Environmental Quality was out in front in creating perhaps the biggest environmental justice plan that the borough has got, and that's the Brownfield Opportunity Area designation for the entire Harlem River. We literally recreated polluted areas into new accessible greenways, and created the report to bring the funding and the agencies. So we just need you to take a look at that. It's called the BOA report. And finally, we're really at the point where we have so many needs to complete this Harlem River Greenway. We applaud everything the federal government has done for the Bronx River, and we need it to do the same for the Harlem River, quite simply. We're looking at a long greenway that knits together many, many different communities. Where is the coordinator for the whole thing, for the greenway itself? Where are the neighborhood organizers that'll get this going? There's clearly personnel and advocacy needs to make this happen. And you know it'll affect more than transportation. It affects health, recreation, and economic development in the borough of the Bronx. We really need that link between Van Cortlandt Park and Fordham Landing to come online. It's called the CSX acquisition. And we don't have a greenway until we have all of our communities stitched together from Albany to the South Bronx. And lastly, I guess I just want to say that we really salute all the work of our wonderful partners. And we just hope you hear loud and clear that what we believe will bring the Bronx back is nature. Our access to nature. We have been marching relentlessly to the water. I hope you hear that, from our underserved communities to our waterfront. And we are determined to let nature be our guide and our inspiration for building a new Bronx. We want you to think about greenways and greenways that'll help bring some parkland and green spaces to communities that need it so desperately. So we really hope that you see kind of our big picture here. We are a community that's been fighting back 50 years from federal neglect and, in some sense, back-turning. And we hope that you can bring it back to your principals and to agencies that our communities have really created this wonderful opportunity for you to hold our hand and support us and get us over the finish line, and complete that Harlem River Greenway. We're sick and tired of being sick and tired, as Benny Lou Hamer said. And I really want to thank you and all my BCQ friends for making this happen today.
Thank you, Bob. We're going to turn it over to Karen, and then we want to open it up. Karen?
Yes, hi. I just want to say thank you, everybody, and thank you to the elected officials. I think if somebody else wants to talk from the Urban Waters Partnership, we could introduce them later on. We are BCQ, the Bronx Council for Environmental Quality, is here to bring people together. We're matchmaking, and we can tell you what the problems are because we know, we've been there, we've identified them, we've tried to do a lot of things, but we're all volunteers. We want to get this job moving and we want things to happen. And so that's what our role is here. We will probably do another one with the state representatives because some of the federal money will go to the state and be implemented that way. And so what I wanted to say to our elected representatives, that we really like to know, maybe you can't tell us now, we really like to know how to go about getting what we think we need. And we hope to keep the conversation going. Thank you. Chauncey, your turn.
So this is an open space. I also want to acknowledge that we have Iris, who's our Bronx Park Commissioner. We also acknowledged Liam earlier, but if Iris, do you want to say anything?
I think I just said it in the chat, and I just sent you an email that I could not be prouder to be your Bronx Borough Commissioner. The projects that have been mentioned here are very much a need. We support it. We support all the efforts that are going to better the parkland and the waterways of our great borough. I can't thank the advocates that are out there are so many. And I love that I have a great relationship with all of you and that I support your efforts. It's all for the greater good. Thank you, Chauncey. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Bob. Thank you all, Dart and everyone. that has been participating in this event, and our elected officials know how strong an advocate group we have here in the borough of the Bronx. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So this is the open space where, community members or elected officials could sort of, if we have representatives who were touched by a particular project or something that people would like to connect to, individuals who weren't able to speak that would like to raise something up. We have, we'd like to close around 6, so we have about 10 minutes, 11 minutes for folks to share and get ideas out.
No hands.
And we can popcorn too. I mean, I'm not, you can raise your hand, but you can also just, unmute yourself if you'd like to say something. We just want to be respectful of folks' time, but I think there is a lot that has been shared today.
Yes, I'll go really quickly if no one else is going to speak. My name is Brandon Lloyd. I'm a congressional aide for Congressman Jamal Bowman. Thank you very much for having us on this, Mr. Young. This has been very informative, and I think I can speak for everyone else, including myself, when I say that we learned a wealth of information today. Obviously cannot speak directly for the congressman, but since he's been sworn into office on January 4th, environmental sustainability and stewardship is one of the utmost priorities of our office. The congressman has been very attentive to a lot of the issues that affect both parts of our district, which include several parts and neighborhoods of the Bronx and several municipalities in Westchester. As Michelle Lukey and other people stated who are presented, one of the things we noticed in our districts, unfortunately, specifically Mount Vernon and Yonkers, are increased waste, issues with drainage basins, as well as I'm sure many of you have seen the unfortunate effects of the sewage issues that had been promulgating in Mount Vernon, particularly in February. All over social media, there have been several pictures that residents have shown of sewage backing up into their pipes. So the congressman has actually toured several homes regarding that, and we're in talks with the EPA to see how we can move forward on that. The congressman is also very in touch with the Hutchinson River issue, and as Mr. Lundgren stated perfectly, a lot of those oil streaks are drifting downstream into several parts of our district. So given that we have both the Bronx and Westchester in our district, this has been very informative. I've taken a lot of notes that I will personally share with the congressman after this. Before I go, I'll be more than happy to share my contact information in the chat. Also, I will make sure to send our appropriations request form as well for the fiscal year. Please feel free to shoot me an email or call me if you have any questions. Although we aren't physically in the office, we are working remotely. So we are all, and the district staff are able to be reached virtually. So please feel free to reach out to me or our office if we have any questions. And we very much look forward to working with all of you. So thank you for having us once again.
Thank you so much, Brandon.
Thank you.
Any other comments, concerns, questions?
Chauncey, I'm just going to jump in to just observe. I think this is something that what's been one of the major takeaways is that how much of so many of our issues, concerns, ambitions are interrelated. The fact of seeking out locations for additional boathouses so there's greater opportunity for recreational on-water recreation is dependent on greenways. Without greenways and access to the water, it just doesn't happen. So that, and correspondingly, by having a greater access to the water, people start appreciating the greenways and understand how we connect to nature, how getting on the water is good for the soul as well as for the body. So again, all of these things do connect. And obviously, water quality, if the water quality is reprehensible, for want of a better term, it impacts the ability of anyone wanting to be on the water. So all of these things were all part of the same very complicated puzzle.
Yeah, public health crises or environmental crises. We saw that, and we've been seeing it for a long time. And that opens up a lot of policy and funding opportunities because they are definitely connected.
Tracy, do you want to talk?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks everybody for including me here today, here on behalf of Save the Sound. You know, as Michelle shared, we do a lot of work on the Hutchinson River. I just wanted to share two things for people to be aware of. One is that we have been funded to do a Hutchinson River watershed plan. So we're working in partnership with Westchester County, and the plan, similar to the one that Bronx River Alliance did on the Bronx, it's going to start with the Westchester section first, and then we are seeking funding to do the Bronx section and combine the two. And that's just because of the size of the grants that were available to fund it. There wasn't a grant big enough to do a watershed of this size. So we're going to do it in 2 bites. But New York City Parks and others from the Bronx community are going to be participating as well. So it'll be really integrated. So please, you know, pop me an email or get on our mailing list if you want to participate in that. We'd love to have everyone on the call participate in the watershed planning. And then the second thing I just wanted to mention that I hope people will support and keep their eye on. If you haven't heard of the Renewable Rikers movement, it is a movement that came out of the police reform and incarceration reform movement that has a really great environmental overlap, where basically the proposals that have been approved now by New York City Council would both shut down the prison, the jail on Rikers Island, and replace it with renewable energy installations, and also potentially a state-of-the-art wastewater treatment plant. So one thing we didn't hear about today was the combined sewer overflows, which certainly are also a huge source of sewage for the waterways of the Bronx, all the waterways we talked about today. So if we get a wastewater treatment plant on the old Rikers Island site, the current plan is that a lot of the CSO outfalls that flow into the Bronx waterways could be directly plumbed to that plant, and it could have a huge impact, reducing CSO discharges, improving water quality, and it also will allow the city to retire some old wastewater treatment plants. So that's like a real once in a generation opportunity to do something big. And it's going to be years. I think the Rikers Island is being decommissioned and will be closed by, I think they ended up with 2027. There was a push to get it moved up to 2024. But I think 2027 is the plan. So I just hope people will follow and support that coalition if you aren't already. And thanks for all the great work you do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Chauncey. I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Rob Ferrani from the New York, New Jersey Harbor and Estuary Program and the Federal Bronx and Harlem Urban Waters Partnership. You know, just really great to hear everything that was said today and learn so much about. I mean, I feel like we're active and supporting a lot of community initiatives, and there's so much more, you know, so it's great to hear about all the work that's being done in the Bronx, and just would echo what folks are saying about the, you know, the idea about that a lot of these projects can serve a lot of different purposes. You know, I think one thing that is no secret to anybody here is how COVID has, in the pandemic, has really kind of exposed equity issues and the need for access to nature around the borough and indeed around the region. And a lot of the projects that are being discussed today can tackle many of those issues at the same time, whether it's, you know, adaptation, public access, water quality, and just making folks' lives better. Whether, you know, hopefully as we come out of the pandemic. So thanks all for all that you do, and great to meet many of you.
Thank you, Rob. anyone want to have the last word, or did Rob have the last word this evening? I want to just
I just wanted to
make the
say something,
point.
Chauncey. I just sent you an email because it's something that came down to the last minute, but it's actually the Natural Resources Group application for community project funding for stream and wetland restoration. It's short notice. I just got it. We just got it like yesterday or so, and I just sent you a draft of what it, what the letter can possibly look like. And it's all for the greater good, because if there's funding out there to be able to possibly receive to address some of our wetland areas and streams, so I'm sending it to you because you have the wide reach of everyone. So whatever you can do, we appreciate it, of course.
Thank you.
Yes, and this is incredible. This is, one of our Congress members, Congressman Ocasio-Cortez, is really trying to put natural resources funds into wetland restoration in the Bronx, Pelham Bay area and the coastline of the Long Island Sound. Certainly Bronx Council for Environmental Quality will write letters of support, and I think a lot of our partners on this call that are impacted by this, I think should consider supporting this initiative to get federal funding to do wetland restoration in the Bronx and in Queens along the Long Island
And
Sound.
we do write letters of support to people who are applying for grants and things, as long as it's, something that goes with our goals, which is everything you guys are doing. So just ask. We just need to know ahead of time, because we're volunteers, so we can't.
And let's do that for each other. And
Let's
we
do it.
definitely will.
Turn around by Monday deadline, because this
Right.
is earmarked. So these things need to be turned around fast to support. And
6 o'clock. Time to
So-
go.
Karen, you already know the time and everything? My
Yes.
goodness, I didn't even know that.
Iris, are you
So-
surprised?
Yes.
Well, we hope this was helpful.
It's great.
All right. So
Chauncey, thank you.
folks that came out tonight, we will send follow up with folks that participated. We would love to do another one of these meetings, because as I think everyone said throughout this day and early evening, we're only going to be successful in transforming the Bronx if we work together as a coalition, and Upper Manhattan and our neighborhoods in Queens, right? And Rikers Island. All these things only happen if we come together as a united community to try to address the historic inequities that have been heaped on Upper Manhattan and in the Bronx, and many of our poorer, traditionally poorer and immigrant communities along in New York City that don't have access to waterfronts, don't have access to parks, and don't have safe places to play or recreate with their families. So thank you everyone for coming out this evening, and we will have the recording available for those who would like it. We did record the evening's event, and we can share it with our elected officials who were unable to participate and with our partners that were here today. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Johnson.
everyone. Good night.